Hi, everybody. How we doing? It's October 21st, Brigadoon Radio. We're back today with our good friend, Gerald Ashley. Gerald, how are you? What's happening?
It feels slightly like Christmas time here, Marc, because the pantomime has arrived in London, and the political pantomime. And, well, again, I said last time we needed a 5-hour show. We definitely do this time. But whether I can't imagine it won't come up as a topic, but of course it's not the only thing going on in the world, but it is the story of the moment here, certainly.
Well, the story we're talking about, of course, Liz Truss, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. Is that the official title?
Yes, it is, yes. Oh, no, I think, and I will be corrected here by the listeners and viewers, I think her actual title is First Lord of the Treasury, and that's what it says on the letterbox at number 10. So that's a very nerdy answer, but I think that might be true.
Well, I'm sure our inquisitive viewers will let us know that we're wrong, as they always do. I will say, being here in the nation's capital, surrounded by politics, the Truss situation has gotten a lot of attention. Not surprising. Here in the States, and a lot of people are just watching with a lot of fascination. The parliamentary system is pretty wild. You can be in power in one day, and 44 days later, you're asked to leave. So I'll let you give us a quick recap. It doesn't seem settled. You know, it seems like we're entering even more kind of chaos.
No, I think that's right, and there are heroes and villains like all pantomimes, and you can decide who's who, but the way the British system works is you have to command a majority in the House of Commons. Now, Liz Truss, in theory, could have gone for a vote of confidence, a sort of back me or sack me. And funnily enough, I think she might have won that because Tory MPs, if they showed no confidence, there would have to be a general election.
Sorry, Joe, I think there's 635 members total in the House of Commons.
I want to say, is it 665? Oh no! I'm on the back foot now. It's
600, give or take, right? So
yeah, give or take. Now the interesting thing is, and I think this shows what's been her weakness, that she's politically quite flat-footed. Because if she'd been smart, that rather than resign from the Tory party and then come out onto the steps of Downing Street and say, I'm off, I can't do what I want to do and nobody will let me, she could have tried the back me or sack me card. And that would have been quite interesting to see how many Tory MPs would be willing to risk an election, because it would have been suicidal currently for them. I mean, they've got...
the polling numbers have them, underwater by 30, 35 points to Labour right now.
So, but she seems to be a personality that's not, we don't know her. You might, I don't know, but she's not of a sort of flexible construct, I don't think, and that's been a problem. People are very rigid, turn out to be very brittle, and to use the sort of boxing analogy, she's got a glass jaw. She came out hitting, and then she couldn't take a single hit back, and so, stretching the analogy, she's completely shattered. What's left, of course, is a complete mess, because it's almost exactly what nobody really wants, because there is no obvious, number two in place. There are clearly people on manoeuvres. So what you may call the more centrist establishment wing, maybe of British politics in general, very much favour Jeremy Hunt. The Marc is with him. He's not put himself forward. So the obvious prince across the water, if you like, is Rishi Sunak. Against that, you've got the real prince against the water, who's just flown back from the Caribbean, which is our dear friend Boris. Now, we could have an entire show on Boris, but we can't keep doing that. I've been chiding you over the week, saying, don't be ridiculous, he'll never reappear. And of course, he's made me very foolish by, I imagine he will throw his hat in the ring. I stick to my view, though, that he won't get through. But given my past record, you'll know what happens next.
I mean, I always thought Boris would return in some fashion, but I never thought it'd be this quick, which I think is pretty shocking. I mean, I thought Truss would I mean, what I'm really surprised at Liz Truss is somebody who's wanted this job for so long, has been in politics for so long. Her skills as just as a politician are just horrendous, as you say. I mean, not agile, scared to be on camera, and then to drop such an aggressive economic agenda, which may or may not be needed. But if you're going to go for the gusto, you got to back it up. You got to keep, campaigning, so to speak. I never really felt that from Liz Truss.
I think this is a risk if you spend all your time only talking to other people in think tanks.
Right.
Who think the same way as you do, which is a lot of her background. She's also sort of a convert from the Lib Dems and a convert from pro-EU. And we know converts often violently swing the other way, almost to compensate for their earlier life. So she came in with this very hard-nosed approach, but tactically, or even strategically, but certainly tactically, totally hopeless in terms of, to use a cricketing analogy, so I've just lost all of North America now, she didn't roll the pitch. One of the things you do in cricket is you make sure the groundsman gets a pitch nicely organised if you're the home team, because that can give you an advantage in bowling.
Right.
Doesn't sound very fair or English, but it's what goes on. So she didn't pre-prepare any of this.
I like that analogy, though. Yeah.
And she's just fallen flat on her face.
I think you're spot on. Like, she seems well equipped for like party conferences, fringe events, think tank cocktails, but not a very adept politico, just kind of mixing up in the streaks. Maybe she's had a very safe constituency, a very safe district. I see this a lot, in presidential politics. The president of the U.S., you've got to go through Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. You got to speak to Hollywood people, and you got to eat a corn dog at a picnic and walk the factory lines in Detroit. And it forces you to become quite agile and almost a chameleon. And I never really got that sense from Liz Truss. So it's pretty shocking that how the speed of it. It's almost like this is like intentional, because the speed of it is so shocking.
You just reminded me of the famous incident in the supermarket checkout of George Bush Sr., who absolutely fell flat in his face because he was marveled at how supermarkets worked. And I think that must have knocked 5 percentage points off him straight away. Now, as to the speed of all of this, of course, conspiracy theorists are having a whale of a time. It's sort of probably the best time of year for them. But I think anybody who's been around the block in business, commerce, pretty much anything, politics, knows that it's nearly always a cock-up rather than a conspiracy. And I think this is just a number of particularly unfortunate planets have aligned, and we are where we are. Given my woeful predictions on British politics, I hesitate now, but I suspect Rishi is going to get this, Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
Because there's certainly been some pitch rolling by the 1922 committee in the form of putting almost an absurdly high barrier to entry, in that you have to have 100 MPs support you before you can go forward for a vote. Which would
I think be almost a third of the parliamentary party for the Tories. Yeah,
bit more actually, and it pretty much means at the very most you're going to get 3 candidates, and you may well only get 1. And I suspect there's been a lot of wheeling and dealing about whether Rishi's got 100 or not. But
Rishi, we should remind listeners, he was the most successful candidate coming out of the parliamentary vote. He just got sunk in by the grassroots. The grassroots decided to go with Liz Truss, and she snuck through. What do we feel about Penny Mordaunt? Is she going to be the queen maker, if you will?
Is she sufficiently neutral for everybody? Maybe, though. I think she could be.
She could be neutral today. I mean, she did back Liz Truss, but it seems like alliances will be shifting quite quickly over the weekend.
Yeah, and this is supposedly one party, and you made the very good point. I think it was last time or the time before that in the US you got 4 parties sitting within a 2-party system.
Right.
It's not dissimilar in the UK. There's certainly 2 parties or 2 quite strongly opposed wings in the Tory party. I think if it's a coronation with only one candidate over 100, more mayhem to follow. I don't, because it'll, everybody will scream, this is a stitch up, it's all been rigged and everything. Whether that will convert into anything more than screaming and shouting, who knows? Interesting to note today that with Boris probably landing even as we speak from the Caribbean.
I wonder if the Sky News have a camera outside Heathrow.
Yeah,
they must, right? Are they watching all the jets land?
Yeah, this is the Daily Star have moved from the lettuce to probably Heathrow runways. The thing that's going on here is that if Boris A becomes a candidate and B, shock horror, wins, you're going to see mayhem on the other side of the Tory party. The extent we've already had about half a dozen MPs say they will resign their seats and try and force a by-election. So this is a very toxic atmosphere. In the meantime, Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party in opposition, is playing to one of his great strengths, which is, of course, he's incredibly dull. And people want somebody dull.
That would be a great campaign poster. It's a time for dullness.
Yeah,
Labour 2022.
Exactly. There is actually a place in Scotland called Dull, so he could launch his campaign from there.
I like what you're thinking. I like
that's your sort of professional PR.
You need like the what's the advanced angle? No, there's something you said about that. I'm Keir Starmer. You'll never hear from me. Put me in number 10. It's perfect. Well, let's go ahead.
All I'm going to say. So when we reappear on this show in 2 weeks' time, if we haven't been fired by the producers, who knows where we will be? We will have another prime minister. Whether they will command any respect, whether they'll even be in control of Larry, the Downing Street cat, we remain to see.
Well, that's a good segue, because we want to talk about masters of the universe and who is really running the planet. There's been a lot of talk about bond vigilantes, multinational CEOs, quote unquote, the market, the blob. I don't know. Is it the market, or is it just poor communications? I think if Liz Truss had made the case, if she had the mandate, I don't know, would we be here? Would the markets reacted so violently? Are the markets to blame for Liz Truss's downfall?
Well, I think she's her own author, really, because she put the cart before the horse, and she played the popularity card. Let's talk about tax cuts. And let's try and slide all those nasty spending cuts through a little bit later. And, let's not talk about that. Of course, the market took one look at that and had a heart attack. And everybody now is suddenly become an instant expert on Mrs. Thatcher's administrations. But it is a fact that under Thatcher, there was a large amount of spending cuts and austerity before there were any sign of tax cuts. In fact, a very memorable budget of 1981 with Geoffrey Howe was swinging tax increases, and people, there was a gasp of breath when that happened. And she basically played the line of, look, something's got to give here. We're going to take in more revenue, and we're going to spend less as well. So what happened with Truss is the markets were unprepared for this. It was a sort of blitzkrieg approach.
And my understanding too, even her cabinet, this wasn't like everybody at the table, we're on board, this is our plan going forward. This was, devised by a handful of people. It was
also terribly rushed because Tory party conference, the Queen's funeral, all sorts of things. Instead of just holding their horses for a month and going around and doing good old politics of canvassing people, promising people seats in the House of Lords and all this sort of nonsense. None of that was done. And we got the result. Now, of course, like all these sort of genuine shocks to markets, they have quite big implications. One I think we shouldn't forget is that the overall global outlook for bond markets are pretty grim anyhow. You only have to look at US Treasuries that are having one of the worst year in decades in terms of rising interest rates and falling bond prices. And so it was the background was bad as well. So the last thing, as you say, the bond vigilantes wanted was another shock that they just hadn't factored in at all. And then, of course, like in all good fiascos, there are lots of secondary stories. There's a lovely one about UK pension funds who've been jacking up on derivatives as a way to try and make up for the fact that their bond holdings don't yield enough money to pay pensions. And they convinced themselves, and even more frighteningly, they convinced the regulators that it was perfectly okay to sort of put all sorts of leveraged positions in to get their portfolios looking better. When the music stopped, of course, derivatives don't just move, do they? They really move. And so then this is, the whole Bank of England pension fund gilt market fallout.
But this is a well-used tactic. I mean, even here in the States currently, the Biden team, making noise about Saudi Arabia, OPEC plus, which is the new term. There's OPEC plus, which is, I don't even know what the hell that is. Putin talking about NATO, these kind of supernatural or multinational forces that are somehow controlling the sovereignty. Obviously, the Brexit, vote is still lingering in the UK. Trump obviously found opponents everywhere. And maybe it is true. I don't know. There are other forces, but what's interesting, but we've decided to how can we find a way to not make sure we have great continental powers battling each other? And, some of these institutions have been around since the 50s, and, peace and prosperity has generally reigned, which has been good. So I don't know.
I would make two observations. The first one actually comes from the former Labour politician whose nickname was the Prince of Darkness, and I refer to Peter Mandelson. And Mandelson made the observation that when Gordon Brown lost the general election to Cameron in 2010, it didn't really matter because the future world was run by technocrats, and that politicians were just a sort of sideshow to entertain people who probably people like you and I watch politics shows and all the rest of it, and that the real work was going on elsewhere. Now, I think the problem with that has been that, as you say, a lot of these institutions have been around for a very long time, but the world has got more complicated, and the world has also got more joined up in the sense that something goes wrong in Japan, it hits China, the next thing it's suddenly hitting Western Europe, and it's not hitting in 6 months. Sometimes it's hitting in 6 days. And so whether technocrats or the overall model for a lot of these things continued to work, I don't know. Conspiracy guys like them because, funnily enough, people who are at the top of these institutions pretty much tend to be the same sort of breed. They tend to be high-flying graduates. They tend to be not from an academic background rather than from a commercial or any other background. And then, I don't know, let's invent a number. There are probably 25,000 of them around the globe. And they all, you can't know 25,000 people, but they all kind of know one another in various circles.
Right.
They all come out of the same jelly mold. And as you say, is that a sustainable way to run the world in the future? I don't know.
Yeah, just the engagement. I mean, there's been a lot of talk that globalization is dead, which I think is crazy because we're so much more connected, and just global supply chains and where you source stuff from. It may be evolving. We're certainly much more connected, and there are a lot of forces. I don't know. Maybe I guess if you're in it at the time, it looks pretty horrible, right? But in 6 months' time, if we could somehow figure a way out of Ukraine, if China doesn't do anything crazy, I don't know. Some of these organizations probably are doing their job.
I think one other observation is that all of what you say is true. I agree. I mean, globalization is still around. You only got to go in a supermarket. I can buy strawberries in January.
Yeah, love it.
Should I wish to. The broader point, though, is that, and it's a kind of well-worn phrase, but the tectonics of geopolitics are definitely moving and are breaking up, and maybe breaking in ways that are unexpected or are going to cause, surprise pressure points. Ukraine's an obvious one of these. We've touched over the year that we've been regaling people now. We've touched on all sorts of, unusual areas of potential conflict, like sort of North Africa, where they've got big oil and gas reserves, and of course where uranium's mined from. And you can go around the world and look at all sorts of pressure points that weren't really thought about 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, simple things like, where's all the lithium coming from for all these batteries for electric cars? And so the world is very joined up and is very complicated, and more of this to come, I think.
But saying the world is complicated as a leader is probably not going to help you win votes. So, picking winners and losers is probably a better way to go, at least on the campaign trail. Let's pivot to Asia. Barack Obama, pivoting to Asia. So on Sunday, local time, which I guess will be Saturday night in the U.S., early Sunday morning in the UK, Xi Jinping is to clinch his third term as supreme leader of China, and also kind of reveal the political standing committee. She's really been on, this is like the biggest moment of his life. And, at least here in the West, he's not getting as much coverage. But this is a big, big deal in my mind. Anytime, we have a leader who's poised to be in power for multiple decades, it creates all kinds of havoc.
Well, 2 or 3 observations. If it's the United States and you're allowed to go 3 times rather than 2, and I know Roosevelt went 3 times and they changed the rules and everything, but you'd be talking about Xi being a lame duck president now, because he'll be in his final 5 years. He doesn't kind of sound, look, or act like a lame duck. So one wonders if 3-year rule may become 3-year term may become a 4-year term. He may be around for a long period of time. Yeah. Maybe the thing to watch out for is who is the anointed successor.
Well, that's the big thing about this. Yeah, the standing committee, I think it's presently 7 members. Does he shrink it down in size? And usually, old China hands will be watching to see, the placement of the people, who's next in line, how many allies did Xi get on there. But regardless, it does seem that we are entering not so much the presidency of Xi, but really the chairmanship. And somebody this week was talking about now that Xi is the CEO, the chairman of everything. That is, he is the ultimate supreme ruler. He's got his hands in everything in China. He is the guy running the Middle Kingdom.
Now, will he fall foul of the political rule that when you've been in power for 10, 12 years, you start making bad judgments? You may even start going mad. Also, there are lots of evidence in the West where people have stayed too long. You could argue Mrs. Merkel stayed too long, probably Mrs. Thatcher, definitely probably stayed too long. Will he now actually overplay his hand on some things, I wonder?
Well, I know very few political leaders that get to leave on their own accord, right? Most of them are tossed out. They leave in shambles. And talking about George Costanza on Seinfeld, telling a good joke, sometimes you need to know when to leave the room, when to leave the party. But I think Xi has wrapped himself up like he's like the guy that can save China. He sees a lot of problems. I think the reporting is all wrapped around the fall of the Soviet Union, what the Communist Party sees there happening. And he's the guy to save it. But I think if you're in power for too long, you just create more and more enemies every day. So staying in power too long, it hurts the country long term. But I think Xi has really convinced himself and the people around him that he's the guy to save the party.
I think there's a subplot here, although it's a bit more than a subplot, which is the Biden administration's quite going in strong on AI and limitations on technology and technologies sharing schemes and really shutting that down. And you ally that to the fact that Chinese GDP is certainly quite a bit lower than what they used to report. They seem to be reporting far less detail.
100%. Yeah. I think China's like an economic story like that those headlines are over.
And then we come to the last part of the equation, which is a frightening thing, is if things aren't going well at home, you stir things up abroad. And that's where the Taiwan card comes in, I guess.
Right.
So I sense that we may be at peak Xi, we may even be at peak China, because is their economy stalling? just as their demographics start to very gradually, thin out. It's going to be over many decades. But you can't, this idea that China's going to be number one economy and be streets ahead and everything, and it's a Chinese century. I think that story might be starting to fade somewhat now. And
there's always been this kind of idea, will China become gray before it becomes rich? And the demographic challenges are quite immense. In my mind, they've done all the easy stuff to modernize an economy. And, there's only so many condos and roads you can pave in China before you, kind of decrease your economic input. There's a great article. Go ahead.
Sorry, this is exactly a rerun of Japan in the 1980s. The Japanese rebuilt after the war. They took all the best American business models. They got loads of outside capital and they worked their socks off. And by the mid 1980s, America's sort of having a heart attack with, Lee Iacocca saying we got to do something to stop all these Japanese cars. Then the Rockefeller Center is bought by, I think it was Mitsubishi Real Estate. And, people...
Pebble Beach Golf Course, all this great stuff.
You say every golf course was Japanese. And then, of course, the music stopped because their economy had just been so bloated and so overheated. And, of course, they got the demographic problem. So, we can't just say it's a precise parallel, but it's worthwhile bearing in mind that template.
One of my favorite talking points, and I think you've heard it, if you were freaked out by Japan in the 80s, you're going to be terrified of China in the 20s. There was a great line, I don't know if you read this week, Edward Luce in the Financial Times had a great column, getting back to your thing about Biden and the technology. The headline is, containing China is Biden's explicit goal. Luce goes on to say, this is basically the biggest thing that has happened. We are now in a full-blown economic war with China. It's not really getting the attention that it deserves. The Biden administration has basically said, no, we're no longer going to help China rise economically. And that storyline is really what China's been about since 2008. We could be entering some really rocky waters.
I mean, if you're President of the United States, I think you're right, you've got that sort of proxy commercial war going on. And if one's honest, you look at Ukraine, NATO is effectively running a proxy war against Russia. And now, if you had sat down 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, certainly, and said that was going to be the case, people said, you're mad, we're never going to get into that type of situation. What I think is problematic for both of these situations is how they resolve themselves. And to use the phrase, where's the soft landing? You kind of have to me, I think the Ukrainian thing could go on for a very long time. And somehow Putin has to be given an out. There has to be a way for him to, exit gracefully. And I think the same with China. And now I think in China it's much more difficult, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I think, once again, more excitement across the world. Let's go back to, we're talking about Japan. Let's explore this a little more and talk a little more about Japan. Certainly militarily, they're upping their game. I think they're meeting this week with the Australians. They're part of Quad. They have they have a pacifist constitution, thanks to the efforts of the United States and others after World War II. But Japan, to me, we're going to talk about this book, but Japan to me seems to be the country to watch. Quite interesting, very sophisticated, very modern, a lot of money. And it doesn't seem like they want to be on the sidelines anymore. They want to really be much more aggressive, kind of force their own destiny.
They probably can't afford to be either. And again, we can blow our own trumpet because I think we noted probably back in April, May time, there was suddenly a lot of publicity about how the Japanese were rebuilding their navy. And, people are saying, well, it was a very significant navy in the Second World War and in the First World War. And of course, they flattened the Russians in whatever it was, 1906 or anything. So they have a huge military naval tradition. And they basically had a coastal navy up until because of all the restrictions. Well, that is changing big time. And it's obviously a direct response to China. they've got the issue with the Rocket Man. We never do an episode without mentioning the Rocket Man, but he's kind of down the the celebrity end of things. And again, I always sound lighthearted about him. It's not a lighthearted topic, but and from Japan's point of view, it must be serious. But the bigger story is the one which I think you're talking about, which is Japan now sees itself as part of an Asian network that is going to involve Australia. Be interesting to see if India become part of this mix, and of course, it's going to be very closely allied to the United States in the Pacific. And I suppose you could say that it's needed because is the United States strong enough on their own now in the Pacific? I mean, they have been for 40, 50, 60 years, but you may now start to doubt whether that's the case.
No, I think we need to dig in this more, but it's just kind of breaking now. But Australia and Japan to share intelligence and the security deal, they're calling this epic making. This is kind of unprecedented closeness between Japan and Australia. It's interesting because everything about the Pacific now, the most of the talk, as you mentioned, it's like the U.S., but really Japan is probably the country to watch, right? I mean, there's no way the U.S. can completely dominate. We can influence the Pacific Ocean, and Japan becoming stronger is probably is a bigger story.
I agree, and I think there's, as ever, it's not just politics it is politics, but it's not just a military side. There's the economic cooperation. Are we going to see this Trans-Pacific? I'm going to get the letters wrong here on this trader.
That's a whole alphabet.
There's another alphabet.
Just pick 10 letters. You'll probably be close.
But this business of even Britain is wanting to try and join that. It's quite interesting that Britain sees itself as a Pacific, involved in the Pacific. But it comes back to your point about it being a globalized world. And people are very busy trying to join up, put together all sorts of alliances, whether it's military or economic. And Japan, I think you're right, is an absolute key factor in all of that. And
they're closer. They're closer to Beijing. They're closer to North Korea. As you rightly point out, they've got a lot more vested interest than certainly the United States. So Japan, country to watch. I've never been. You've been, though. Quite a few times.
No,
You've never been.
No,
I flew through the Tokyo airport. That doesn't really count, but I've never properly been to Japan.
No, that doesn't count. I like to say I've been, decades in international finance, but I've never actually been to Tokyo, which is a minor embarrassment, really. But I do see, in fact, they've only just reopened the country in the last few weeks to the foreign visitors and people going on holiday. So it's on my bucket list of things to do. But then I have to
maybe we can take the show on the road. Absolutely.
Let's drop Rye and let's start talking to Nippon TV on TV.
We can do a residency. We're available.
We are. We're still available.
Let's finish Taiwan. I want to chat a little bit about Taiwan. I went to this Taiwan Expo USA, which was hosted at the Ronald Reagan Trade Building. They'd never done this before. It was a combination of leading Taiwanese companies in healthcare. They talk about tourism, automotive, kind of 5G, smart city. Quite an impressive display, which is interesting. Just talking to some of the companies, a lot of these companies obviously invested in China, but they're shifting production to other parts of Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, even going as far as Bangladesh, getting more and more out of China. But we get the real sense that, listen, they're also looking for friends and customers and investment opportunities in the United States. So pivoting away from China is the main driver, not only obviously economically, as we talked about, but also geopolitically. Taiwan can no longer, there's a sense that they can no longer rely on just being friends economically and politically with China, that they need to spread their wings. So quite an interesting display, big commitment, big presentation, and interesting in DC, which is not really an economic center of commerce, but they decided to do it in DC.
So it's a hearts and minds thing for the sort of beltway, really, is it, to sort of lobby soft softly about.
It was 100% like just if it was an economic kind of decision, you'd see it in Chicago, San Francisco, or New York. But to be placed in DC clearly sends the message to a lot of different governments that Taiwan is pivoting away, looking for other friends. So quite interesting development to watch. Yeah,
no, I again, we're going to be in violent agreement on this. I think the sort of $64,000 question is will China invade Taiwan? I hesitate to predict anything these days.
There's always been these headlines every day now, like, China moves up the timetable. China's the 20, all these, who can possibly know what the hell China's thinking?
Exactly. Well, I think that's exactly right. And
what is up with these headlines? I mean,
yeah, well, somebody's got to write something every day. You've got to fill those column inches. And, but you could just go back to sort of view of self-interest. And is it in China's self-interest at any particular point to do anything with Taiwan? I don't know. It might be, going back to the earlier comment, at some point in President Xi's interests, if things go badly domestically. So if the economy really does slow down and the Chinese model doesn't really have a mechanism for dealing with unemployment, that's always, it's all been fine whenever, as you say, everything's growth and go. But if they have a number of years of sluggish performance or relative decline, how do they cope with that? I don't know. It also seems like a proper invasion of Taiwan is like a generational effort. I can't imagine it going smoothly. And it's also then, okay, what's next? Because the rest of the planet is not going to stand still and be like, okay, everything's fine. I mean, I presume that President Xi has got better foresight than Liz Truss, who never looked to see what the response might be to any of her moves. Presumably, he's thought that through. Also, just think about it. It would be. I actually just thought of a business idea. Xi Jinping as political strategist. Maybe he should open a communication shop on the side. I can see him being your, Chinese representative, even as we speak. And you must be worried anyhow, because I think you must have been hoping to get Boris as a client for speaking engagements, and now that might not happen. So you need an alternative. But I think, of course, we don't know. And again, if you're president of the United States, there's another big thing in the in-tray. I mean, the big two things I think are Taiwan and Ukraine, and well, I think this will go on for years. And in a way, hopefully, it will. That's the point. We can just keep the whole thing rumbling along without anything serious happening. That, in a way, has to be everybody's best interest, I suppose. And you're spot on. There are a lot of domestic interests that she's trying to placate, including the PLA. And, it's good to have an enemy. It's good to have an opponent. It's good to have a boogeyman. And, the evil forces keeping China out of Taiwan could satisfy domestic audiences. Yeah, and we do this personally. I mean, I can think of loads of people who are guilty of why my career hasn't been really, illustrious. It's the old joke in dealing rooms or in trading rooms. It's my profit, but our loss. You notice with all the superstars, they individually make the profit, but it was a collective loss. And that's one of the early lessons you learn when managing people, actually. Quite fun. I like that. That's good. All right. We're going to close up what we're reading and watching. Gerald, do you want to go first? Yes. Last time we mentioned Benedict Cumberbatch, and we're not starting a fan club for him, but again, I've been on Netflix and I found quite a good film which he was in. Though, actually, I'm not certain the film is that good. So I'm not certain this is a recommendation. The story is fascinating. And the story is the so-called current wars, the electricity currents we're talking about here, between Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse. And folding into the mix is Nicholas Tesla. Interesting. Mr. Tesla is nothing to do with the cars. That was Elon Musk, who's a big fan of Tesla, quite rightly so, I think, naming the cars after him. Now, I think the English perspective on Edison is different from the the American one. I know in America he's very much the big hero. In England, he's seen a little bit more of a rip-off merchant, because there are lots of arguments about who invented the first electric light bulb, and there's a very strong claim to a guy from the north of England called Joseph Swan, who arguably did it at least a year earlier. But that's kind of by the by. But what it comes out in this film between Westinghouse and Edison is, again, the sheer politics of getting a technology rolled out across the United States. So is there a goodie or baddie in this? Edison doesn't come out of this very well. Mind you, JP Morgan, the individual, not the bank before they start suing us, JP Morgan, he doesn't come out of it too well either. So it's a very good story. There may be a good book somewhere. The film is not that well executed. Apart from anything else, it seems to have been filmed in the dark. There may be the clever illusion of when lights when lights come on and all the rest of it. But boy, they could have spent a bit more money on the lighting, which is a little bit ironic. But there we go. It's called The Current War, with Benedict Cumberbatch et al. On the reading side, I thought we drifted too much into history and poetry, so we're going to get a bit more mainstream here, or maybe more back to markets and stuff, which is what I'm supposed to be interested in. I've gone for a book called The Misbehavior of Markets by Benoit Mandelbrot. Mandelbrot of the Fractal Mathematics. Here it is, off the book.
Love it.
You think it might be a heavy read. We've got a serious heavy duty physicist here trying to look at how the financial markets, or markets of anything, and human behavior, what's going on. Is it predictable? Is it inherently unpredictable? And it's a very good read. I'm not going to give it all away, because the idea is one should write the book. But of course, like everything in life, the answer is somewhere in the middle. Some parts of markets are really quite predictable, others are virtually random. And it's well worth reading, I think. So there we are. The Misbehavior of Markets.
I love it. I need to know more about the market, especially if when I become, Prime Minister of the UK.
That's not for at least another 6 weeks. The way.
All right. I read this book on the future. I guess, is it Martin? Is it Rees? He's
Martin Rees. He's a very highly distinguished astronomer.
Yeah. I must say, it's a bit of a pamphlet of a book. I mean, I don't know. I think if you're well-read, curious, kind of know what's going on, you probably know most of this. Probably not necessary to read the book. I think the most interesting thing was energy. It's going to be a huge issue. Not surprising. Just the demand for it, the need for it. And then not so much artificial intelligence, but really machines. I'm not talking about robots. I'm talking about the machines that can do multiple things.
Yeah.
Robots really are just doing one task. Machines, living with machines, I don't know. That's going to be the interesting future. But really, energy to me is going to be the big thing. So on future, I don't know. I don't think you need to read it, Gerald. You know enough about what the hell's happening in the world. So
he was Astronomer Royal, which is kind of grand.
Well, I must say his titles are absolutely fantastic. Yes, he's the Astronomer Royal, which just sounds fantastic. Master of Trinity College.
That's a nice
Director of the Institute of Astronomy at Cambridge. Member of the House of Lords. President of the Royal Society. On and on and on. I assume he has a lot of power lunches.
Yeah, he's a very distinguished guy. I think he's probably popping on a bit. If viewers or listeners look him up on YouTube, I think there are quite a number of quite accessible lectures by him. One of his big themes, if it's still the case, he has a rather dystopian view of the future of the world. He's very much in the camp, we're going to blow ourselves up at some stage.
Yeah, I mean, he basically said the world is divided between nature, humans, and machines, and he's confident machines will survive.
Great.
Which gets into the energy thing, Bitcoin. It's all, like we're going into this I don't know. We're going into a situation where we don't need human bodies.
Maybe it's a hybrid world.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty negative too because of the climate stuff. Getting into energy and.
Well, you think about it. Why on earth are we trying to send human beings to Mars? I mean, it's completely mad. Why not send machines? I mean, I know we started sending machines, rovers and things, but a lot more of that. The idea that we're going to send somebody to stick a flag, which will almost certainly be the Stars and Stripes on Mars, or it could be the Chinese flag. But what on earth is the point of that? 2 years to get there.
Who wants to? You can't. What's the marketing there? You're going to have a machine do a book tour? I mean, come on.
Oh, here we go. It's bad PR. Of course, I missed it. Bad PR.
Here's the other book I just started. Richard McGregor. This is a few years old now, but it's Asia's Reckoning. Basically, it's a history of China and Japan. McGregor wrote a great book called The Party, which is about the Chinese Communist Party. It's the best book I've ever read about the Chinese Communist Party. He's an Australian. He used to work for the Financial Times. I think he's with the Lowy Institute now, that think tank. Very accessible history. I don't know. Japan is like my new obsession. So Asia's Reckoning.
Okay. I've got one more on the viewing thing. This is a sort of pre-announcement really, because it's not out yet, but I see there's a remake. This is of All Quiet on the Western Front. Now, this is a very famous book from the late 1920s, and it's the German perspective of being in the trenches in the First World War. Is
that another Netflix project?
Yeah, it was a very, very, I think that's right. I think it's a very, very successful film soon after the book, I think in 1930. And so much so, I think it's voted in the top 100 best ever films. There was a remake in the 70s, which was kind of a bit of a 70s remake. But there is a trailer out, and what I've seen of this new version looks very compelling. So it's certainly one for people to look out for.
I love it. More World War II. We need more World War II.
Well, we're still on World War I here, so you just have to wait.
My bad. I guess I need to watch it. More World War I. I'm going to finish up with this show on Apple TV. It's 10 episodes. It's called Bad Sisters. It's a Belgian remake. It's shot outside Dublin in Ireland. Essentially, 5 sisters. One of the sisters is married to a real jerk of a husband. The other 4 sisters conspire to murder him, and mayhem ensues. It's quite funny, quite comic. It's really good. It's on Apple TV. And I want to leave everybody with this. Thomas Edison. Next time you're in the New Jersey Turnpike, there's a rest area, Thomas Edison service area, where you can get petrol, gasoline, snacks, use the restroom. So
now he was based in Menlo Park, wasn't he, in New Jersey? So
yeah, there's a lot of New Jersey. I think you can actually visit. Yeah, his childhood home was actually in Ohio, which you can visit, and then he spent his kind of formative, most successful years in New Jersey. So.
Well, my passing thought is not to do with service stations, but it's a quote from The Life of Brian by Monty Python. And I'm going to slightly change the quote. It's about Boris. Boris is not the Messiah. He's just a very naughty boy. And we'll see if that plays out to be true or not.
I love it. With that, All Quiet on the Western Front, World War I. I apologize. REI. Hopefully they'll call. If not, I think Nippon TV. We pivot in 2 weeks. We have a deadline now for Rye.
Yeah, we
2 weeks.
We can move on. We're global. We don't need to be in Italy. Well, I feel I'm in Italy at the moment with British politics anyhow. So
Britaly. I know. Was that a great cover by The Economist? That was pretty good. All right, Gerald. We'll see you in a few weeks' time. I'm excited to see what happens.
Indeed. Enjoyed it. Take care.
Ciao.